all my kids. And I was like, you know, that's a great connection. Move on. I need you to go get some
Alright friends, did everyone get a rubric?
Oh, I told Mike.
Your little team Bible for the year. Alright, we will go ahead and get started so you can get out of here because I'm sure you're sleepy like I am. Who's from Houston High? Houston High? Riverdale? Riverdale? Dogwood? Farmington? Forest Hill? Houston Middle? Woo! That's what I like. Spirit. It's hard to do at 4:30 in the afternoon. Alright, so I'm Jessica Woody. Like they said, this is my 12th year as an administrator. I started teaching Houston Middle when I was 21 a long time ago, and then went several other places, and then came back. We actually years ago piloted the state's evaluation model team before they switched to team. So we had training with the actual NIET people, and I'm one of those weird people that loves the evaluation process. I think it's the most important thing that we do as administrators and as teachers because it's what we do to make ourselves better, all of us, which helps our children. So we're just going to look at the instruction rubric today. You probably know there are several other ones. Those I think are a little easier to tackle. The instruction rubric can sometimes be overwhelming because it has 11 indicators. So we're going to look at some of those today. Let's see if my little video works. Oh, of course. Hold on. Hold, please. How do I make it go to my... How do I make it show my video?
Go to the airplane.
But it's...
Good thing. And it's not.
It's on the screen.
You can mirror instead of separate.
Do your own thing. You do.
Nope.
Get out of the PowerPoint.
Yeah, can you exit out of the
Yeah.
PowerPoint?
That's what I'm trying to do.
I did, and like it's showing me in YouTube here.
There it is. Well, there's
Ha ha. No. Okay. Because you were on two different displays. That's why. Is that one?
Nope.
Now can you? Ah, dang it.
Here, we'll just listen to it.
No Child Left Behind, best program ever.
You know, they should make fire alarms more accessible to the little children.
You know, just keep your head on your desk. You need the rest.
I hope this day never ends. So I got the student the other day, he's like, I'm done with my gun. I'm like, you're done with your gum. Why don't you just stick it on your desk? Just stick it in your locker. Why don't you just put it on your lunch tray?
My dog ate my lesson plans.
Hey, pizza. Yes, I love to volunteer for detention.
Did anyone watch Jersey Shore last night?
Did you see Honey Boo Boo last night?
I didn't realize it was Friday. I didn't realize it was Thanksgiving break. I can't believe it's fall break. I didn't realize it was Christmas break. Can you believe it's summer break?
I can't wait to volunteer for bus duty.
Just hand it in at the end of the day. Why don't you just turn it in at the end of the week? You know, don't worry about handing it in. It's just busy work.
Salisbury steak. I had so much free time, I started working out. You think I could just come in and work through the summer? Hey, did you watch Jersey Shore last night? Don't you love standardized testing?
Just watch the movie. It's the same as the book.
I really hope there's a fire drill day. I love that I can leave work at work.
I love it when it rains because I just get to spend more time with the kids in the classroom.
Don't you think our breaks are just too long?
Just clip note it. Just spark note it. Yeah, sure. Wikipedia is an acceptable source.
Brunswick stew.
I love writing reports.
Can you believe how cheap private school is these days?
I wish the government was more involved in my lesson plans. I feel like the month of May is like the most relaxing month. This summer is never going to end.
I am so overpaid.
I want to go shopping, but no, I just don't really need anything. Have you been keeping up with the Kardashians?
Alright, so I'm sure I've actually said I can't believe it's fall break already because it's almost fall break, which is hard to believe. Is that working? Okay. Here we go. So why teacher observations? I'll go ahead and put all my answers up there. To stress me out, to see my dog and pony show, my administrators need more paperwork, or improve teaching and learning. Believe it or not, it's lots of work for your admin too. But, like I said, I think it's the most important thing that we do, so I actually am the weirdo that likes it. It is none of those things except D. A, I know it stresses everybody out, I know it does. Great teachers, 20-year teachers, first-year teachers, just because we love what we do so much, and everybody in my building comes to school every day to do what's best for kids. And so once you start kind of looking at ways to tweak that and what you're doing great and what you can improve on, I know that gets very personal. Trust me, I get it. Dog and pony show, I would not recommend it because your kids will flat out tell on you. They'll be like, she only acts this way when you're in here. Trust me, or we've already done this lesson, she made us practice it. Or she keeps this lesson plan in her top right hand drawer. Trust me, they will tell it. Big and little, they will tell it. We don't need any more paperwork. I have plenty. But it really is to improve teaching and learning. So I know it can be scary. Like I said, we piloted the evaluation model at Houston Middle years ago when the state switched to team. And before team, this was our number of level 5 teachers. This was our number level 1. And after 1 year of that, it flipped. So I know it's effective. I know it's a lot and overwhelming looking at this. It's not a checklist where, yep, did it, yep, did it, yep, did it, yep, did it. I know some people get into the habit of that. But I 100% believe that it can improve your teaching and then improve student learning, which is what we all go to work every day to do. A lot of us, especially when it first rolled out, I had to get this out of my teachers' heads because as teachers, we look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and think A, B, C, D, F. It is not A, B, C, D, F. If you are scoring a level 3 for the state, that meets expectations. So if you'll notice, once we get in the rubric, level 3s are at expectation. If it comes back and your TVOS data is a level 3, you did everything you needed to do for your kids that year. So a lot of times teachers, we're the hardest on ourselves and we think a 3 is a C. It is not. Level 3 is a rock solid lesson. You are rocking and rolling and giving your kids everything that they need. 4s and 5s above that, hey, that's terrific. That means you are going to end up growing your children more than a year. 2s and 1s, we've got some work to do, but that's why we're all here. So please don't equate a 3 with a C. I know most teachers are perfectionists and we want all the gold stars, but don't worry if you are not scoring all 5s if the lesson is not scoring all 5s. If you are getting 3s, that is a rock solid lesson and you are meeting the state's expectations. All right, let's look at our instruction rubric. When we were initially trained, you always start at level 3, so that's kind of what we're gonna do today. This is yours, so feel free to mark it up. So even when I, as an administrator, I'm in the room clickety-clacking and taking all my notes, and then I go back to my office, hopefully that same day, unless there's a fire in the building, literally or figuratively. And so I print out my scripted notes, and I look at the rubric, and I always start at level 3, which is at expectation. So I about got the little indicators memorized by now, but you then move back or forth depending on the data that you have from that one lesson. So when the observer comes in, they are scoring that one lesson. They're not scoring you. They're not scoring what you normally do. They're not scoring how much they love you and how great they know you are. They are scoring that one lesson that they're seeing based on the rubrics that they're doing. So I take my scripted notes. I start at level 3 and I move back and forth. You can score 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 even though they don't have the 2s and the 4s on here. So what your evaluator is looking for is the preponderance of evidence. So where does most of the evidence fall? So the first one, standards and objectives, they're looking at those different bulleted items. I start at level 3 and I either stay at level 3 or I move to the right or I move to the left based on the preponderance of the evidence. It is not a checklist. So I don't go check, 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 check. Oh, nope, they didn't have that check. They don't score a 4 for whatever that is. If you look at some keywords, typically at expectation, you're gonna see most. In the 1 column, you're gonna see rarely, never. And in the 5, you're gonna see typically, always, or all. So those are some of the words that kind of help the observer move back and forth. There are some bulleted items that have more weight than others inside the indicator, each indicator. So, for instance, standards and objectives. I will tell you as an observer, I don't need to see 4.3.297 WH, whatever it happens to be, because that doesn't mean anything to me and it doesn't mean anything to your kids. So I want to see learning targets. I love some learning targets. If you ever want to talk about that, let me know. But learning targets, those are the I can statements of what can your kid now do after sitting in your class for 55 minutes or however long your class is. So what am I learning? What am I now able to do when I leave your room? So that's the learning target. So as the observer, I see that when I come in, you discuss it with your kids, you mention it several times through the lesson, that's what you're checking to see if they're actually kind of making progress towards that. So that last indicator there, the last bullet in the first indicator, there's evidence that most students demonstrate mastery of the daily objective that supports significant progress towards mastery of the standard. That one is super important. That's why we all come to work every day, is because we're trying to move our kids towards mastery of a standard. So the learning targets are so essential, because if you are not laser focused on what your target is for that lesson, it's really easy to lose track and lose sight of that. Your learning target is never a super cool activity. That is not the learning target. What is the learning that's coming from that super cool activity? And I would caution against paid teacher activities that look so totally awesome, but don't match your learning targets. Because they might be fun and they might be cute and the kid may love it, but if it's not moving you towards mastery of your learning target for that day, what you doing? I know we all like to have fun, but you can do that moving towards mastery of your standard. Motivating students, that one is typically easy for people to kind of figure out. Are you listening to your kids? Are you making sure it's personally meaningful for them? Are you reinforcing their efforts? That's where the, good job and that kind of stuff comes in. Presenting instructional content. There are lots of important things in that one. Modeling is one that sticks out to me, because you're modeling your teacher expectations so then your kiddos know what it is they need to do. Do you have examples? Do you have illustrations, analogies? Are you relating it to something that they already know? So is it confusing? And we've all had those lessons where we think, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever, and I have got it laid out perfectly, and then midway through the kids are like, huh? What? And you're thinking the same thing, because it happens to all of us. So that's sometimes where the confusing information falls in. I love hearing that email button at 5 always means good things. Lesson structure and pacing. Was the teacher in there, or was she getting her coffee for 20 minutes? That happened one time. So that was always a fun conversation. Is there a coherent beginning, middle, and end to your lesson? What I see some of our teachers struggle with is our kids, and your kids are all the same kids, are so dang smart, most of them, and we spend 40 minutes of the lesson teaching the lowest level of the standard when we probably could have started in the middle of that standard and kind of pushed forward for most of the lesson, because the lesson time will end and you're just like, oh, I didn't get to the good stuff. I'm like, I know, we should have started, a little further along. So lesson structure and pacing. Do you have routines for handing things out? Did you spend 15 minutes getting the computers out? I know sometimes computers don't work. Okay, we're all used to that. Look at this. I didn't show. So I get that, but do you have structures in place to pass out papers? Are you spending the first 20 minutes walking around and putting stamps on papers for kids who did their homework? Well, you just wasted 20 minutes of class time. Activities and materials, super important. The first bullet there, support the lesson objectives. I know that sounds silly. Of course, everything I would do in a lesson would support the lesson objectives, but that's not always the case. You would be surprised. So make sure I always ask my teachers, what's the point? What's the point of that activity you just told me about? If it's not to support mastery of your learning target for the day, why are we doing it? We can have lots of fun doing stuff that supports your learning target. Is it challenging? That goes back to lesson structure and pacing somewhat. It is okay for your kids to not know all the answers initially. I know sometimes in observations, teachers will think, oh, my kids have to know every question that I ask. Well, no, they don't, because then what the heck are you teaching them if they already know it all? You're wasting their time. So it's okay if they don't initially know the answer. Now, if it's 1 minute till class is over and no one still has any idea what you're talking about, then, you know, we could have a problem. I'll let you read through those. There are lots of different things that you can look at. Once again, the 3 column has most, the 1 column has few, and then the 5 column has all. Questioning. Some people are gifted innately with questioning and some people are not. And it's perfectly fine, doesn't matter which one you are. But do we get back past just the knowledge level of questions? Are we getting into the application, the creation? Are you calling on volunteers and non-volunteers? Are you giving kids wait time? A lot of times I will see, like I said, teachers want their kids to know the answer right now. Hurry up and give me the answer because Miss Woody's sitting here staring at all of us. But wait time is good. You should still be giving your kids wait time even in an observation. Feedback, academic feedback. I don't know why the word academic cut off. Academic feedback is sometimes confusing for people because they mix it with motivating students. And if I tell you, oh, you did such a great job on that, that is not academic feedback. You didn't tell me anything specific academically. You didn't tell me what I did great academically, what I need to improve on academically. So academic feedback is exactly what it says. It has to do with feedback based on the academics that I'm doing then. So rather than saying, oh, that's great, you did such a great job, you need to be specific with what they did. I like how you remember to cite those 2 sources that we talked about yesterday. You did a really terrific job on that. So she knows exactly what she did correctly. Kid sitting next to her is like, oh, shoot, I only put 1. So then he remembers he's got to go back and add 2. So you're helping the kids who you're directly speaking to and everyone else who is hearing it. So academic feedback needs to be specific to the academics that they're doing. Are you monitoring and adjusting? If everybody knows what you're doing, keep going. If it blows up, that's perfectly fine. It happens to all of us. But can you as a teacher modify what you're doing and kind of regroup and keep going from there? Grouping students. Sometimes whole class is a group. So please don't think, oh, I have to put these kids in groups every single day. Because if there's not a point to the group, then don't do the group. Sometimes they are all alike academically. Sometimes they have, you know, you got your high, middle, and low in a group. It just depends on the point of the group and the point of the lesson. But as long as you know why you did what you did, then you're good to go. And sometimes you might have to explain that to the administrator because I'm not gonna know necessarily how you grouped kids unless we had a pre-conference and you told me. But if it's a drop-in, you know, you can discuss that in your, in your post-conference. Alrighty. Teacher content knowledge. This is another one. Sometimes that will cause a little bit of confusion because of course I know my content. Hello. And that's great, but if you cannot translate that into student knowledge, then it doesn't really matter if you know your content or not. It is that translation part that sometimes trips people up. So if the lesson doesn't score well in teacher content knowledge, it doesn't mean that you don't know everything about your content. It means that lesson may not have done a terrific job of translating that content so that the kids could then pick it up. Teacher knowledge of students. This one's pretty easy to see. If it is November and you don't know your kid name yet, that's not so hot. I know we all have a million, but at least fake it and call them honey or buddy or something. Don't call Samantha and their name's not Samantha. Do you already know where kids are gonna struggle? Do you know someone has to have, you know, a larger map? Do you have to chunk something so this kid's gonna get 3 pages and this kid's only gonna get 1? Do you know where the trouble's gonna come in because you know this one step in that math problem solving always confuses kids? So are you looking at those things and planning for them ahead of time? All goes into teacher knowledge of students. Thinking and problem solving are kind of linked and similar to me. Thinking for a level 3 is you are teaching one type of thinking. Just because you do math does not mean you are necessarily problem solving. But either the observer needs to see you are teaching, if you're teaching analytical thinking, analyzing, comparing, contrasting, explaining information, the observer needs to see you teaching that, or it needs to be very evident that you have already taught that. For example, if you're gonna do a Venn diagram and you're comparing whatever it is your subject area is, and you hang up a Venn diagram and say, okay, fill out your Venn diagram, and the kids are like, what's a Venn diagram, what do you want me to do with this? And obviously you have not thoroughly taught that thinking process. So you either demonstrate it then through your modeling, what you want them to do with the Venn diagram, or you've done it before, you've already taught that type of thinking, so then they can just go straight into the activity, but that would be obvious to the observer also. And then problem solving, they list several different things there, and most of them are pretty self-explanatory. And if your learning target is getting to higher level stuff, typically you're doing those types of things anyway. So I know that's a lot. I know I went quickly, but I didn't want to keep you forever because I know everyone's tired. Does anyone have a specific question about the instruction rubric? I can answer for you. Perfect. All right. Expectations, what you should expect from your observer. So if it is an announced visit, you will have a pre-conference. And that's where you come in, you say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, here's my learning target, and you kind of run through it. And your administrator, typically, like I ask probing questions, and if I see someone's gonna fall off the cliff, I don't let them just fall off the cliff. I say, well, hey, have you thought about, this, and what do you have for that? So that's one of the benefits of the pre-conference. But once you are finished, you will get a refinement, reinforcement. Always have to think positive reinforcement. So reinforcement is a positive one because those words are really interchangeable to me. But positive reinforcement is the strength of the lesson. And then refinement is the indicator that you could tweak for the lesson. You should have strategies for implementation, number 3, love it. Strategies for implementation. So I'm not ever gonna tell my teacher, you really need to get better with some questioning because that would really make your lesson better. Okay, great, thanks. Have a great rest of the day. I'm gonna give you specific feedback of how you could have improved if it's the questioning indicator in that particular lesson, and then kind of how that can carry over. So those should be your expectations. So if you're not getting that from your administrator, you might want to ask some probing questions, because next time they come in, they may just want you to, did they just want you to guess what they meant by strengthening your questioning? So you have the right, and that's your opportunity to ask questions. Well, specifically, what did you mean by that? How do you think I could have changed it in that lesson? That kind of thing. You can also ask for a follow-up. Like I said, everybody's super busy, but that's the most important thing that we do and you all do as teachers. So if I say, for questioning, you really need to, maybe that's not just your strength, then that's fine, because you've already told me that you struggle with that. So I may say, well, here's some question stems. Why don't you just keep those with you, near you, so you're not having to come up with questions on your own, and they're organized by, the different Bloom's levels. Or why don't you write down 5 questions that you need to ask, so you already have it. Why don't you have them on sticky notes, and then you can walk around as the groups are going and either, assess or advance their learning and reuse them all day. So if you say, okay, great, that sounds terrific, then say, hey, I'm trying this next week. Would you mind dropping in for like 5 minutes, just to see how it goes? I would love to do that. I don't know that all administrators would, but you definitely should expect a refinement and reinforcement and strategies for implementation, because you deserve that. And if you're not getting it, you might just have to ask some questions, but I'm sure all of your observers are terrific. All right, so now let's ask for help. Go and watch someone. Self-reflect and self-assess. My favorite teachers are the ones who already know everything I'm gonna tell them before they even come into the post-conference, because they're probably harder on themselves than I would have been scoring the lesson. My favorite thing, it always happens, I'll say, so, what do you think went well with the lesson? Because that's where we start, like at the parent conference, you start with the good stuff. So what do you think went well with the lesson? What would you do exactly the same? They're like, I should have never given them that blah, 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 or I took too, I'm like, no, that's not what I asked you. But 99.9% of the times, teachers want to go directly to what they thought they could have done better. So the best teachers are self-reflective teachers. and you are already self-reflecting and self-assessing yourself every single day. And then breathe, because it's okay. It will all be okay. It will all be all right. If you have specific questions for me, that's me. That's my cell number. That is my gymnastic email address. If you want any of that, I would be glad to talk to you about anything. If you're thinking of trying something and want to run it by me, I'd be more than happy to. Don't call and complain about your administrator, because I can't do anything about that. But if you need help, if you have questions, if something in this rubric confuses you, I'm serious, call me or email me. I'll be glad to help with anything. You may have any questions? Well, I will hang out in case you do.